Back in the 50s, a new sound took New York by storm. It was called mambo and cha-cha-cha. That is, until it was dubbed salsa. A decade later, a Jewish kid from Brooklyn fell under its spell and went on to become a Latin music legend as pianist, composer, arranger, and bandleader. His name is Larry Harlow. Harlow honed his talents as a disciple of the brilliant Afro-Cuban musician Arsenio Rodriguez, known to all as El Maravilloso, the Marvel. By the time Harlow formed his band, Orquesta Harlow, he had already been crowned El Judío Maravilloso, the Jewish marvel. Harlow takes us from the ballrooms of the Catskills to the New York clubs and to their reigning performers. Among them, Celia Cruz, Arsenio Rodriguez, Tito Puente, Johnny Pacheco, and the Fania All-Stars. 3 decades of New York's golden age of salsa.
America has always been a country where people from different walks of life have come together to create new ideas, invent new products, and find ways to express themselves artistically. Music has become the instrument that has broken down many barriers. Latin music is one of the most popular music genres in the world, loved by great numbers in all of the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. One musician of Jewish-American origin was part of a group that was instrumental in propelling salsa music to this worldwide stage. He is known by everyone as El Judío Maravilloso. His name? Larry Harlow.
I was born down a block over here in Bethel Hospital, but I grew up right here at 446, 448 Rockaway Parkway. These were 2 buildings that had about 50 teenage kids my age, and we all grew up together. We played baseball here and stickball here. And I took a lot of pictures out here with my mother and father, and we had a lot of fun. Across the street, we played baseball, and we went roller coaster down on our sleds in the snowstorms, and we had a real great time. Most important thing is we had a lot of family and a lot of kids and a lot of children that lived in the same neighborhood. And I was very fortunate to grow up with a lot of friends.
Growing up in Brooklyn, especially in the Harlow household, was quite an experience because it was music all the time, day and night. My father was the band leader at the Latin Quarter for many, many years, played the bass, and he sang in many languages. My mother was an opera singer. My younger brother Andy played the saxophone and the flute and the vibraphones. My father's sister was a pianist. My grandfather was a theater critic for the Daily Forward, which is a famous New York Jewish newspaper. So I was brought up kind of on Broadway, and my father took me to all the wonderful shows, to Rodgers and Hammerstein's King and I, and Oklahoma, and My Fair Lady. So I was brought up in this household that was full of music all day long. I started my piano lessons when I was very young, but I listened to many different kinds of music, especially jazz, because I was more interested in the creative process of music, how to improvise over a chordal structure. But there were many happy moments, many happy times, and it was a wonderful childhood. I went to a school called PS 165, which was in the middle of Brownsville in Brooklyn. I had many, many friends. Our group must have been about 25 or 30 youngsters. My friend Heshy lived a block away. Neil lived on the next block. But most importantly is that I got a great musical education.
Well, when I was 13 years old, my grandfather passed away. And I moved to this building over here on East 93rd Street in Brooklyn, which was built by my grandfather. My mother and father lived upstairs, and my grandmother lived downstairs, and they fixed up this little basement apartment for me right down over here. So I lived here till I was about 16 years old, and then I discovered Greenwich Village, and I became a beatnik, and I had a little goatee. And I used to go to Washington Square Park and play folk songs with Bob Dylan and Jose Feliciano, had a little sing-eye dog, and we were the original hippies in Greenwich Village. But then I just fell in love with Latin music. And when I went to high school, my high school was in the middle of Spanish Harlem.
In 1952, I took a very hard examination and audition to enter a very prestigious high school called the High School of Music and Art, which was located on 137th Street and Convent Avenue in Manhattan. I used to take a bus from Brooklyn to the train, another hour on the train going all the way up to Spanish Harlem. And when I left the subway, I used to walk up 4 or 5 blocks up this huge hill, and I would hear this strange music coming out of all the bodegas and the mom and pop record stores. It wasn't called salsa then, it was called música latina. And I was wondering, what kind of music is this? This is really nice. So I investigated a little further, and I was influenced by the 1 or 2 Latino musicians who were there in the school that taught me how to understand clave.
One day, a friend of mine said, come on, let's come from here. We'll go way down the street over there to rehearse in this band called Hugo Dickens and his band. And these were African-American guys that wanted to play Latin music. And the only music that they had was these Cuban stocks. They were printed on little old recycled paper, and it was called Mambo number 5, Mambo number 1, Mambo number 2, you know, dum. And I used to read the music, and they said, wow, you play terrible. He says, you better practice or we're going to throw you out of the band. So I ran to the nearest record store, which was down there on Amsterdam Avenue, and I bought a Joe Loco record and a Nora Morales album. And I learned their solos, note by note, by memory. And I went to the next rehearsal, and all of a sudden I played, and they took me into the band. So I was kind of accepted, and that was my beginnings, the beginnings of my introduction to Latin music. Very important also was the whole culture, the cross culture in this neighborhood. You had the Latino community, you had the CCNY, City College of New York, right next door, and 2 blocks over to the west was the Apollo Theater. But it was a wonderful experience being here, and this school was a very big part of my life. Dave Valentin went here, Andy Gonzalez, Jerry Gonzalez, many musicians in the Latin scene graduated this wonderful high school. It has since been changed, and it has since moved down to Lincoln Center, but it's a very wonderful school and a very big part of my life.
As a youngster, Cuban music became a major influence on Larry Harlow. While still in high school, Harlow made a pilgrimage to the very source of the music. During a 10-day school recess in 1956, the young Cuban music aficionado visited Havana to witness firsthand the art of many Cuban artists and musicians. He later made 2 similar visits.
Cuban music is the music that has as its roots the music of the island of Cuba from 2 regions in Cuba. One is the region of Oriente, where the song comes from. The song is a musical genre which is really the basis for Cuban music from a musical point of view. It's a musical genre. But that song, when it comes to Havana, takes on another characteristic, which is the characteristic of the rumba. Because the people that play song in Havana are rumberos. So it's 2 musics merging. There are 2 musical genres that merge that make the popular music of today in Cuba that then is popularized by Cuban musicians around the world through the use of both the recording industry and later on the film industry. And that is that Cuban music is the total sum of the Cuban experience, whether it be from the music of the Santeria, from the music of the traditional musics of Cuba, such as the different types of rumbas, la rumba columbia, the oldest one, the yambú, and the guaguancó, el son, el changui, which is also from the province of Oriente. All of those musics together come out as one type of music, which is today called Cuban popular music.
Christmas 1956 was a turning point in my life. I made my first trip to Havana, along with what we call the Mambo-niks, the Jewish Mambo-niks, all my Jewish friends who were in love with the cha-cha-cha and mambo. And we went to Havana for the first time. I had never been out of the United States before. And here I was thrown into the real deal, the real thing. I was just so surprised to see how much music there was just free for the people on the streets. I mean, there was out going on one corner.
La noticia me llegara un día de que en Oriente muere el carnaval. Tremendo lío por María en Cuba, porque sin rumba ya no puede estar. Como el río que se oye en río, que como Oriente tiene carnaval. Estoy seguro que me hacía el fuego de saber lo mismo allá, porque yo nazo con el ojos perros, con sabor de samba, sonido al paisano.
There was Benny Moré on the next corner.
Ay, Ceboruco, así te llaman porque eres demasiado bruto, Ceboruco, así te llaman.
Septeto Nacional on the other corner.
Con sabrosura, bailar la sola. Lo mismo prisa que despacito, cuando lo bailan. Con tu chiquito, contenta dice. Suavecito, suavecito, suavecito.
In 1957, I went back to Havana. But this time I was a little smarter. I came prepared. And I brought this big Webcore tape recorder. Of course, there were no cassettes in those days, so it must have weighed about 90 pounds, and lots of extra tape, music paper, cameras. And I made friends with a lot of Cuban musicians, and was permitted to ride on the band buses to Oriente, and Pinal del Rio, and Camagüey, Matanza, and following Roberto Faz and Orquesta Aragon to their dances that they played in the different provinces.
When the revolutionaries were fighting on the outskirts of Havana, we used to hear the bombs exploding and things like that, and then they said, all Americans out. And I took the first plane, out.
In January 1959, Fidel Castro marched into Havana and took control of the Cuban government. This event changed the panorama of popular Latin music and begins to give birth to a new Afro-Caribbean sound in New York and Latin America. Salsa. In the 1950s, the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York proved a true melting pot for Latin music and musicians. In those days, before the advent of the Beatles, every hotel and resort in the Catskills had a Latin band, and many future salsa stars met there and practiced their art, while summer vacationers tried to learn to dance mambo and cha-cha-cha.
The Jewish people of New York City supported cha-cha-cha and mambo anywhere they went, to the clubs, especially to the Catskill Mountains. Catskill Mountains was an area of maybe 100 hotels about an hour north of New York City, where all the help were young Jewish kids going to college. Either they were waiters or busboys or musicians like myself. And each hotel had what we called a rumba band.
The music was really supported by the Jewish population, and every single hotel had a small group that played in a lounge, and then they would have a dance at night with a big band. And some of those bands would play in 3 different hotels in a night.
Las montañas, por allá, los Catskills, era como una San Juan al norte durante el verano. Así que había un entusiasmo basado por una cultura en común.
The Catskill Mountains, before the Beatles, every hotel and beach club had a Latin band. So Larry would be playing in one hotel, I'd be playing with my band in another. Tito Puente was up there, Tito Rodriguez, Randy Carlos, Jose Curbelo, Barreto, everybody, Joe Cuba. Joe Cuba, when he had Jimmy Sabater, Willie Torres, and Cheo in the same band. Larry and I used to go there every night. Wow, listen to that.
Y en el Hotel Shanks fue donde conocí a Larry Harlow, que para aquella época era una orquesta de puros judíos. Eran todos, no había latinos allí.
And in my band, I had no Latinos in my band. We were 4 Jewish guys and 2 Italian guys. And we used to play songs of the La Playa Sextet, who also had no lead vocalist also. So we would sing 8 bars of coro and then play 8 bars of trumpet, 8 bars of coro, 8 bars of trumpet, because nobody knew how to speak Spanish.
A nosotros nos fascinó ver cómo este grupo de muchachos americanos, judíos, que no tenían nada que ver con nuestra idiosincrasia, tocaban nuestra música.
I played in the hotel where all the musicians used to come after they finished their regular jobs. They used to come to my hotel, and we used to have the Latin jam sessions till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. No importa el dinero, we just wanted to play.
Y fue en el Hotel Shanks y con Larry Harlow donde primero hicimos el primer jam session. De los otros hoteles, los músicos parábamos allí porque era la última parada, el último que se quedaba un poquito más tarde. Larry tocando, y allí pues llegábamos todos y formábamos una rumba nuestra, informal, sin la clientela. La administración del hotel nos daba el salón y amanezcanse ahí si quieren.
It was like going to school, like learning and experimenting with new sounds and new chordal structures, and including jazz in the basic Latin rhythms. It was a wonderful time to grow up, wonderful time to play some great music and to learn from my newly acquired Latino friends.
In 1964, Harlow was asked by Johnny Pacheco to join him in a performance at New York's World's Fair. Shortly thereafter, Larry formed his own band, Orchestra Harlow, which made its debut at the Chez Jose on 77th Street in New York City. This was also the year that Johnny Pacheco and attorney Jerry Masucci formed the now famous Fania Record Company, unaware of the success that the future would bring. Harlow's first recording for Fania in 1965 was titled Heavy Smokin'.
Pacheco had just broke up his charanga band and made his conjunto. And he recorded the first album with Fania, the Callanazo album, Pacheco y su Nuevo Tumbao. And that started off Fania. And then I was playing at a little club called the Chez Jose, and one day Jerry Masucci came down. I didn't know who he was, and he said, well, I'm starting a record company, I'm a lawyer, and blah, 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 and I would like you to record your band. I'm going to send my musical director here to listen to your band. So I was so nervous all week, and it was raining, and there were very few people in the club, and we started to play to tables and chairs, and in walks his music director. And who was it? It was Johnny Pacheco. So of course I had it in with Pacheco and blah, 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 and I was the first artist, apart from Johnny Pacheco, that signed with Fania Records.
Harlow fue el segundo hombre que la Fania buscó para sus producciones. Y entonces Larry tuvo un impacto fuerte, grande, bien vendedor, y eso hizo que entonces vinieran otras figuras a la compañía.
And one by one, Willie Colon signed, Bobby Valentin, Ray Barretto.
In 1966, during the peak of the Beatles and the Boogaloo era, Harlow met a 15-year-old Puerto Rican singer named Ismael Miranda. This meeting would prove transcendental for the future of salsa music. In 1967, they recorded their first album, El Exigente.
A Larry Harlow lo conozco porque la orquesta de Larry Harlow para los años 60 estaba muy de moda en los Estados Unidos y en Puerto Rico y Sudamérica. Una noche yo estoy cantando en un lugar donde estaba Larry Harlow cantando, y ahí fue por primera vez que conozco a Larry Harlow. Yo estaba cantando esa noche con el hermano.
My brother had just started his own band also, and he had a young singer singing with him by the name of Ismael Miranda, who was 15 years old at the time. And I snatched Ismael from his band, and I told Ismael, I want you to stand on the side of Monguito and watch how he sings and listen to him. And watch how he plays maracas, because he's un maraquero bien chévere. And Ismael stood on the side of Monguito for 1 year and sang coro and watched and learned and listened. And when he was ready, we did our first album together.
Esa misma noche que conocí a Larry Harlow, conocí a Joey Pastrana, y Pastrana me invitó para una grabación para grabar con él el primer disco, Let's Ball. y era mi primera grabación, así que me fui con Pastrana rápido a grabar. Pero a los 6 meses, Larry me llamó para hacer una audición para ver si yo podía pues estar con el grupo, ¿no? Y fui a la audición, fui bien preparado porque ya yo conocía todos los temas de Larry. Ese día ahí estaba Ismael Rivera también sentado esperando por Larry, ¿no? Y gracias a Dios, pues, Ismael Rivera le dijo, mira, este muchacho parece que es bueno, yo creo que es mejor que te quedes con él, ¿no? Y Larry le gustó mucho, ¿verdad?, la forma en que yo cantaba. Así que fue un buen feedback y ahí comencé, en las próximas semanas comencé con Larry.
He had a little kid that was working in a dry cleaning store by the name of Ismael Miranda. And Ismael went with Larry's band. And he was still working in the dry cleaning store. Every time Larry needed him to record a coro or a lead, he would put a sign up on his cleaning store taking a break or something, because he was running the store. The owner wasn't there. One day the owner came that he wasn't supposed to. Obviously, Ismael was out of the dry cleaning business and working full-time with Larry.
Lo primero que nosotros hicimos, que grabamos, fue el disco El Exigente. Fue un disco donde unimos la música americana y la música caribeña. En ese LP yo tuve la oportunidad de empezar a componer canciones y escribí 2 o 3 temas para ese LP. Y luego de eso, pues, seguimos grabando. El disco pegó mucho en Puerto Rico, empezamos a viajar y a hacer muchas cosas bien interesantes.
¡Al judío maravilloso!
Larry Harlow and Ismael Miranda enjoyed 7 great years together. During these years, they traveled and performed all over the world. They recorded many albums, including such great salsa hits as El Exigente, Me and My Monkey, Oportunidad, Abran Paso, and the masterpiece gold record, Tribute to Arsenio.
Larry Harlow and Ismael Miranda was one of the perfect combinations. You can hear it in the recordings. There's no mistaking it. The same way Machito and Bowser, Vicentico Valdez and Tito Puente, Larry Harlow and Ismael Miranda, because together they sold so many records. And that's what counts, when you have one artist complementing the other. And they had it. They had that that's important to sell thousands of records.
Nosotros la pegamos.
Throughout the years, many salsa greats became members of the Fania All-Stars. The formation of the original Fania All-Stars was a very simple formula.
There was the band leader, like Barreto, had Roberto Rodriguez, his favorite sideman, and his singer, Adalberto Santiago. I had Larry Spencer, my trumpet player, and Ismael Miranda. Pacheco had Bomberitos Azuela, and Pete Conde, his singer. And that's the way the Fania All-Stars was originally put together. Each band leader would have his favorite sideman, his favorite musician, and his singer of his band. And since then, the singers have gone on to become the stars of the show.
Everybody, a great big air for the Fania All-Stars, everybody! Now, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you wonderful people in the All-Stars from New York and from Puerto Rico, a great big air for the maestro, Johnny Pacheco! Johnny Pacheco!
Thank you, sir. Right now, I'd like to present the voice of the band. La estrella banda, la gente de sabor. Our man on calle, the one and only Ray Barreto. From Puerto Rico, el tremendísimo el bombón, Roberto Rueda. Al timbales, nos vamos a Magic Hands, Oreta Milató. En las teclas, los menos piano, los one and only, the man with the white suit, Larry Harlow. On trumpet we have, from Santo Domingo, Héctor Zarzuela. Lead trumpet, el señor Roberto Rodríguez. And the All-American, Larry Spencer. Yeah, baby. Lead trombone, a man you know, Barry Rogers. From Puerto Rico, second trombone, Reynaldo Jorge. Woo! You know the other cat. El Malote, Willie Colón. Woo! From Puerto Rico, Richie Ray. And Bobby Drew. The man with the red suit. Parece que ando feliz hoy. Héctor Lavoe. Another beautiful singer, mi compadre, Conde Rodríguez. El otro maravilloso, Adalberto Santiago. Para gozar y bailar. En la maraca, el niño bonito, Ismael Miranda. The man with the golden voice. El hombre que pone los boleros no tiene que ir en la China. Santo Colón. Y el niño mimado de Puerto Rico, el único. Chao, Feliciano. ¡Vaya! Y para servirle, el niño dominicano, un servidor, Pacheco, con todos los hierros. Oh my God! I almost do! Bobby Valentín! How beautiful arrangement!
En Latinoamérica decir la Fania era como los grandes de la salsa. Eran la gente, en ese tiempo eran la gente más importante del género de salsa.
Cuando uno veía a Fania All Stars, ya Larry Harlow era como una figura que hacía falta dentro de ese conjunto, de esa orquesta.
El trabajo comienza con un taller que fue muy famoso en los años 70, se llamaba la Fania All Star. Ahí empezamos a trabajar juntos en equipo, como los que conocen la trascendencia y historia de la Fania. Viajamos el mundo entero, tuvimos oportunidad de dormir en muchos aeropuertos.
Fania rompió fronteras, fue donde nadie más ha ido. Japón, África, Alemania, casi toda Europa.
On August 26, 1971, the Fania All-Stars, with Larry Harlow at the piano, burst into the scene with their now legendary concert at the Cheetah Club in New York City, which was filmed and became the foundation for the movie Our Latin Thing.
Larry also was the one who was the primary mover and shaker and instigator in Jerry Masucci producing the film's Our Latin Thing.
He was very instrumental in Fania Records producing the first film, Our Latin Thing. He was the one who came to me with the idea and introduced me to Leon Gast.
Larry Harlow was going to work as a co-producer on it, so he worked very closely with me in the post-production, in the pre-production, in the production, and then in the post-production. I can remember looking for locations that would be high ceilings, good acoustics, area where people could dance, and the Cheetah was the ideal spot.
And we did it at the Cheetah because the Fillmore East had closed down. We wanted to do it at the Fillmore, and that closed, and we were going to do it at Central Park. We couldn't get a permit, so we wound up at the Cheetah. And Ralph Mercado said, nobody's going to come to see this. I said, you wait. And there were lines 12 blocks long from 52nd Street down to 45th Street, around the corner, waiting for people to get in to see this, this night of all the band leaders that recorded for Fania,
Gira era un salón de baile muy famoso en los años 70, en la 52 y la Octava Avenida en el centro de Nueva York. Y ahí fue que hicimos la Estrella de Falla, que fue la explosión de la salsa en el mundo entero en el año 71.
Si le gusta el mamoncillo, cuando baila el son montuno, se le caen los calzoncillos. ¡Canta, Ramito! Quítate tú pa' ponerme yo.
Esta es una noche inolvidable para siempre. This is a night that we will never forget. It's a one of a kind. The night at the Cheetah with the Fania All-Stars. And especially this song, Quítate Tú, which became a classic. This song ran for about 45 minutes when we did it live. But we had to cut it down for the movie, we had to cut it down for the film. Each singer took an inspiration. We went around about 5 or 6 times. And some of the greatest singing happened at this particular moment. A night that's unforgettable.
For the movie A Latin Thing, we shot a concert with Larry Harlow's band, Imael Miranda was singing, and then Pacheco played the flute for one time. And Larry Harlow asked me, "Izzy, come on down. I want you to, introduce the band and keep the people moving." This was a street party, block party, on 13th Street.
Vamos, caballero, la orquesta. Larry Harlow and his orchestra.
Ah, Abran Paso. What a song. Ismael Miranda, one of my favorite singers of all time, wrote this little ditty that we did on the steps of a church on 13th Street for our Latin Thing during a block party. A wonderful time, a wonderful party atmosphere, and part of our Latin Thing.
Cosa buena abreme paso, que yo vengo preparando. Que a todo el que necesite, hoy yo le voy a ayudar. Abra un paso. Hay cosa buena, abreme paso, que yo vengo bien caliente.
This is the spot where the 13th Street Church stood and the neighborhood today.
Abran paso. Ay, mamacita, ábreme paso. Mira lo que yo te traigo. Traigo hierba buena. Mira, yo tengo el camisa. Traigo mi jorana. Traigo a mansa guapo. Y rompe Saragüey. ¡Ay, nada más!
What our Latin Thing did for salsa was to expose it to a large segment of the population that wasn't aware of the music. Not only here in the United States, but I got to travel with the Fania All-Stars. I went to France with them. I went to England with them. I went to Spain with them. I went to Germany with them. The reaction everywhere we went to the music was that it was the new, hip, happening thing.
Gracias a ese concierto se reafirmó el interés mundial, internacional por nuestra música y comienza a exportarse la salsa a nivel mundial.
This film opened the doors to places that had never seen the New York salsa scene before. The word salsa became accepted worldwide. And all of a sudden, Venezuela and Colombia and all the points in the United States that we had never played before was available to us. We started moving out of New York and Puerto Rico. And then the Fania All-Stars went on tour. And once that tour happened, our Latin Thing became a reality.
2 years after the success of the Cheetah, the Fania All-Stars performed at Yankee Stadium, where over 40,000 screaming fans filled the stadium, and the movie Salsa was filmed.
Ladies and gentlemen, here they are, the world's greatest Latin musicians, the Fania All-Stars. Yeah!
It was the first time Latin music was ever played in a stadium. And we put 40,000 people in Yankee Stadium and did our second film called Salsa. But this also included, besides the Fania All-Stars, Manu Dibango, who came from Cameroon in Africa. It also included Mongo Santa Maria, together with Ray Barretto on the same stage, and Mongo Santa Maria's band, and our very dear friends, a Gran Combo de Puerto Rico.
Si no me miran muero, por eso canto para olvidar.
It was also at Yankee Stadium that Celia Cruz performed for the first time with the Fania All-Stars.
Aquí está por primera vez con las estrellas de España, Celia Cruz.
By knowing Manu Dibango and by him participating with the Fania All-Stars on tour, it opened the doors for us to participate in a big concert in Kinshasa, Zaire in 1974 at the World Championship heavyweight fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. A plane from New York left with 300 musicians aboard, with James Brown and B.B. King and the Sister Sledge and the Pointer Sisters and the Fania All-Stars. And we went to Zaire and we played for 3 days. Mobutu opened the doors to his people and filled up 110,000 people in this city.
Turns out that in Zaire, salsa is really, really popular. To give you an idea of how popular they were in Africa, they check into the hotel was Johnny Pacheco, Larry Harlow, and myself. A couple of kids come up, wide-eyed. I mean, guys, teenagers, maybe 18, 19 years old. And Johnny Pacheco, Larry Harlow. And they were really surprised. And they say, you know our music? We know our... And they start doing a Harlow song, singing the choro phonetically, you know, like, and they start scatting solos. You know, they knew his music in Africa.
It was a magnificent experience, just playing with all these great musicians in one place. And by showing the people of Africa what salsa music was all about, because it all came from there. That's the beginnings. The roots of Latin American music came from Africa. Cheo Feliciano signed with Fania Records, and Jerry asked me to produce an album for him. But we wanted to keep the same sound that Joe Cuba had when Cheo was with Joe Cuba. So we had Luis Ramirez playing the vibraphone, and Oreste Velato on the timbales, Ray Barretto, myself, Bobby Valentin, like the rhythm section from the Fania All-Stars with Cheo. Tite Correa Alonso composed a very beautiful song called Anacaona. And luckily they gave me a very long spot to do a piano solo.
I didn't think it was anything great, but after listening to it later on, many years later, it happened to be one of the best solos I had taken. We also did it again with La Estrella de Fania, with the big band. And it was a very important piece of music and a very important record, and also launched Cheo's solo career.
Yo personalmente, como autor del tema Anacaona, reconozco que el solo de piano que hizo en el disco Anacaona con Cheo Feliciano fue un solo de piano genial, inolvidable y un solo de piano identificador.
Mi entrada a ese mundo increíble y a esa experiencia fue con una canción de mi querido compadre, mi hermano, Tite Core Alonso, que fue el famoso Anacaona, en la cual pues Larry Harlow era parte íntegra, con un solo de piano increíble.
Larry tiene una mano izquierda increíble, potente, fuerte.
Yo entiendo que uno de los solos más bonitos, de una continuidad de melodía, que una cosa va con la otra, parece que fuera pensado, pero eso es más bien espontáneo. Pero es el solo de Anacaona que Larry Harlow interpreta ahí un solo. Y pues para mí uno de los solos más bonitos que he escuchado de salsa.
One of Larry's major influence in his music was the blind Cuban composer, musician, and orchestra leader Arsenio Rodriguez. Larry's recording Tribute to Arsenio proved a high point in his career. This beautifully constructed homage to the man who stood at the nexus between tribal African polyrhythms and Afro-Cuban swing, the grandfather of ritmo diablo or mambo, coincided perfectly with the salsa explosion among the second-generation Latin audiences in the United States.
I happen to think that Arsenio Rodriguez is probably the most important person in the history of Cuban music, Cuban popular music. Certain people become very popular in the music, and the popularity becomes almost like a mythical thing, like you would say, like a Benny Moré, or in American music, like a Frank Sinatra or a Duke Ellington or something like that. Arsenio Rodriguez may not have been the best known musician in Cuba, but he impacted on the structure of the actual music, and that's very, very important. Because of Arsenio Rodriguez, they added the conga drum, which today it would be unthinkable to think of a group playing Cuban popular music or salsa without a conga drum or a tumbadora. Well, Arsenio Rodriguez added that part to the music to amplify the rhythm section, and Arsenio Rodriguez added the piano to the conjunto format. He changed the structure of the groups that were performing the music, that were playing the music. He also added first 2, then 3 trumpets with written arrangements. Prior to that, the trumpet used to play ad-lib, and it was done with a group of 6 or 7 people. So Arsenio changed the structure of the groups that performed the music, and also made the music reflect the whole history of the black experience within the Cuban society. He was the most effective spokesperson for black Cubans that has ever existed in Cuban music.
When Arsenio Rodriguez died on December 30th, 1970 in Los Angeles, Larry Harlow was the first to think about giving him a tribute. He contacted a record collector by the name of Rene Lopez, who had Arsenio's recordings. Larry listened to them, selected them, and wrote updated arrangements, which he recorded, and had a Grammy been available for Latin music that year, I'm sure that a tribute to Arsenio Rodriguez would have won the Grammy because of the tunes in that album, the tribute to Arsenio.
Y ese ciego maravilloso negro cubano era una de las estrellas de la historia del mambo en Nueva York. Y Larry, como frente a un altar, tenía digamos, la compasión profesional de admitir en su música que no es solo, que él viene de raíces.
I first heard Arsenio's band in the late 50s in Matanza. And I've always been a fanatic of his orchestra, and the son montuno, and the double meaning of his lyrics of all his songs, and his mixture of folklore Cuban music together with dance music. I didn't see him again until the mid-60s, till I first started my orchestra. And one day he showed up at the Corso, and he asked, his brother Kike asked me if he could sit in with us, and I said, of course. And all the guys in the band just looked at each other. They said, well, you're either a man or a mouse right now, because he started with his tumbao, ring, ding, 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 dong, zing, ding, and started playing son montuno, and every hair on my body stood up.
Arsenio was called El Ciego Maravilloso, the marvelous blind man. And I recorded a song called La Catera. Everybody knows that one because that was like my kind of like my call song, my favorite, one of my very big selling albums called the Salsa album. And in the middle of the solo that I took, I started with a very heavy solo. Alberto Santiago said, "Ahora viene el maravilloso," the same name as Arsenio, but he called me El Judío Maravilloso. And then the name kind of like stuck because the doors were just opening to Venezuela and to Colombia. And they didn't know or couldn't pronounce the name Larry Harlow. They would call me Harry Harlow or Carlo Harlow or stuff like that, but they did know El Judío Maravilloso. So that name kind of stuck with me, and everywhere I went, they said, "Tú eres el judío?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the Jewish guy," you know, and the name stuck. So the next album that I made, I titled it El Judío Maravilloso.
Mi negro, mi, es un varón. Mi negro, mi, como yo quiero a mi negro, mi, tan bueno que es. Oh, es un varón. Oh, y como toca ese muchacho, oiga, qué bendición tan grande. Omi, Omi, tu nombre es Omi, que Dios te bendiga, Omi. Y para ti va esta canción.
In 1973, Harlow collaborated with Puerto Rican writer Henny Alvarez to produce Omi, the only salsa music opera ever put on stage. Together with Fania Records' top artists, they electrified an audience of 2,600 salsa aficionados at Carnegie Hall. The live performance by Celia Cruz in the opera is considered by many to be the main ingredient that brought the Cuban popular music diva back into the salsa scene.
Omi was the first time Latin music was played in an American concert venue. There had never existed concerts before Omi. There was just salones de baile, you know, social clubs, a couple of school dances and things like that in el barrio. But Omi brought music out of the barrio and brought it to the American Concert Hall. Omi was written for Ismael Miranda. But unfortunately, Ismael Miranda left my band about 3 months before Omi was to be recorded. But he brought me Junior Gonzalez, who became a very fine singer. But Omi was his first recording. Henny Alvarez and I worked for 1 year in a little loft in Manhattan, writing this music.
This whole album told a story. The music didn't stop from one place to another. It just kept on going, and one song led into the next, and it was telling a story. I wrote a song for Celia Cruz, I wrote one for Justo Betancourt, one for Pete Conde Rodriguez, one for Adalberto, specifically with them in mind.
We had an idea to bring La Dama de la Música Latina, Celia Cruz, back to New York City, for she had retired in Mexico. I sent her the tape of Gracia Divina, the song that we especially wrote for her. She loved it. She came up to New York City and in one take recorded that song. What a marvel it was to have her on the stage.
Lo que me ha pasado, aunque quise apretarte y besarte.
This sort of brought Celia into the Latin music scene again and rekindled the flames of her career. And from that time on, she is now known as La Guarachera de Mundo. We did 2 live performances at Carnegie Hall and 2 live performances, one in San Juan and one in Ponce, in Puerto Rico.
Él vino a Puerto Rico y produjo Omi en el show, un show creo que en el Roberto Clemente se hizo. Hice la parte de los doctores del show de Omi. Tremendo show, tremendo.
The principal instigator and prime pusher with NARA to try to get salsa into a category with NARA. His name is Larry Harlow. You know who he is.
Tito Puente habla en inglés, yo hablo en español. Yo soy el ganador para el trofeo de judío número 1.
Right after the Omi concert, I was approached by a woman named Elizabeth Granville, who worked for BMI, the music publishing house in New York. And she said, would I like to be involved with the Grammys, with the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences? So I was elected as a member of the executive committee, and I became a voting member. And I realized that there were no categories for Latin music. Latin music fit into a category called ethnic music, which put it together with blues, American blues music, with Australian tribal horns, with Indian music. It was just ethnic music. So Felipe Luciano and I started a petition around New York City. We got over 200,000 signatures and picketed in front of the 1974 Grammys, which was in New York at the Uris Theater. And eventually, through all the signatures and my lobbying, Latin music got its own category, the first Latin Grammy Awards in 1975, which was won by Eddie Palmieri. And now, I'm happy to say, there are 5 Latin categories and 5 Grammys to be given out for the recognition of best Latin recordings. And I'm very happy to say that I was part of that.
Larry Harlow is the first to introduce the idea to NARAS, that's the National Association of Recording Artists and Science, so they can win a Grammy every year. Larry Harlow contacted NARAS, submitted his proposal, and around 1975, Latin music had its first Grammy, which was won by Eddie Palmieri, the son of Latin music. But that wouldn't have been possible had Larry Harlow not introduced that to the NARAS committee.
In 1977, Junior Gonzalez decided to go on a solo career. So I had to find a new singer. So I found Nestor Sanchez, one of the finest soneros in New York City. Unfortunately, Nestor had a contract with Rico Records and was not permitted to sing more than 1 song on this album. So I let Nestor sing the title song, La Raza Latina, written by Johnny Ortiz. And then Ruben Blades had just left Ray Barreto's band. And I asked Ruben to sing La Raza Latina, the Salsa Suite. Ruben, being the great composer and musician that he is, got into the album, really understood what I was getting at, and in one day recorded the whole album. The album starts out with the folklorico music from Africa, and then goes to the danzonete, danzón, son montuno, the mambo, the Afro-Cubano, the music of the Palladium era from 1950s, and then goes to the last part, which is called The Future, where music is going to. I earned a Grammy nomination for that one, and I think it was one of the finest pieces of music that I've ever recorded.
Para mí, el número más significativo para mí ha sido La Raza Latina, porque habla de nosotros los latinos. No saca a nadie, todos los latinos, los cubanos, los puertorriqueños, los dominicanos, los colombianos, y eso es tremendo, porque así es, todos estamos unidos.
Sentirás un gran alivio. Escucha bien lo que te digo.
Y esa música se quedará para siempre. De ahí aprendimos muchos de nosotros y seguirán aprendiendo otros que de momento se van cultivando dentro del género de salsa.
Who is Larry Harlow? Larry Harlow is a brilliantly gifted pianist, composer, and arranger.
My father has helped me learn the culture, learn the appreciation of the culture, not just learn it through books, but to live it and experience it and fall in love with it and feel as if I'm part of it, because that's how he feels. He feels as if he is a member of the community, and I believe he's accepted that way. And it's a good thing. That's there's nothing else you could say about that. I mean, in order to succeed in something, you have to be sincere about it, and that's certainly something that you can say about Larry, my father, and everything that he does. He's sincere.
Larry Harlow is a guy with a lot of dreams and a lot of ambition and a lot of stick-to-itness, and he did what he said he was going to do. Years ago, he said, "I'm going to make it in Latin music. I'm going to go against all the odds. I'm going to be a gringo, an Americano who's going to make it in Latin music," and he did. And he gained the respect of the Latin people, of the Latin musicians, and everybody all around the world. He did it.
In 1994, Harlow teamed up with percussionist Ray Barreto to form the core of a new band, the Latin Legends, to play the type of salsa music dancers dream about. The Latin Legends have been successfully touring the world ever since.
At the 30th anniversary concert in San Juan of the Fani All-Stars, Ray Barreto came to me with an idea, and he said, "Harlow, I'd like to make a band like the Dream Band." Because in rock and roll, they have what they call the fantasy band, which all the great rock and roll players play together when they're not working with their own groups. I said, "Wow, that's a great idea." So we asked our favorite musicians, who we wanted to play with, if they would like to join this band. Of course, we couldn't use the name the Fantasy Band, so we came up with the name the Latin Legends Band. And it was started with Ray Barreto and myself as partners. We picked out Alberto Santiago and Yomo Toro as the principals, and then had Johnny Pacheco and Giovanni Hidalgo, Cachete Maldonado, Dave Valentin record with us.
Today, Larry Harlow continues to create new ideas and concepts to bridge all cultures and give the new generation of music lovers the same opportunities that he was fortunate to have.
Mañanguito.
Next time on Nature. Crocodile